All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm Cyberpunk Holiday, and this is Love and Rockets #1, one of my favorite comic books I own in my whole entire collection. One of my favorite comic books of all time. Love and Rockets. Oh, where to begin? This is probably fundamentally the most overlooked comic book, in my opinion, in all of mainstream comic books. If you have not read Love and Rockets, please, for the love of God, go do yourself a favor and start getting connected with what these comic books are about. So this is #1. Technically, it's not #1. Los Bros Hernandez, Jaime Gilbert. I don't think Mario was in the first one, but the brothers Hernandez, who created Love and Rockets, they actually printed like 500 issues of their self-published, their first actual #1, but this is the published #1 when Gary Groth got a hold of it, and he's like, hey, I want to publish you guys, and so they were published by Fantagraphics. This is one of the most iconic covers of all time. I'm sorry for the glare almost that you're getting from this. I don't even know where it's coming from. This phone? Yeah. So loved. I'll even say that they ended up on Comics Journal issue 100. There's a big spot in here that one day we'll go over with this. There's actually a lot of information from Gary Groth, from Jack Kirby, fighting with Marvel in this one. There's a lot of love for Love and Rockets as well. So look forward to that. But that's how much it's loved. Also, my own book that I did, with the cover to it was an homage to Love and Rockets #1. My book Super Punks that came out about a month ago. Go check that out if you want. But that's how much, I love Love and Rockets. I even put a shout out in the front of it here. Front cover design, a homage to the comic book titled Love and Rockets by Los Bros Hernandez. So there you go. Now let's get into this sucker. $3.95 when it came out. Now it's probably $100 for this issue. Introduction by Gary Groth. What a wonderful book it is. He's not wrong. Creators: Gilbert and Jaime. Creative co-conspirator Mario. 1982 fall. This is Bert Gilberto's. Gilbert's art is the first story here, Bem. And you see the seashells. You see this kind of cricket, this monster. And, flash bulletin. The rumors are officially verified. Bem, a.k.a. Ishmael's friend, has escaped from its island prison late last evening. If you watch the interviews with them, the brother Hernandez, they will tell you that they are fans of old science fiction horror. And that's kind of what this is, the Bem story. Although it's not 100% clear what's going on, it's directly involved with that. And here you have a very famous character. All right, sorry, I was getting a phone call there. This is a very famous character to the lore of Love and Rockets, or would be in the future. This is Luba, a very well-endowed character, obviously. Something that would follow through Gilbert's continuation of his side of the stories, and Polymer, where her stories would take place in a different kind of poor area of her country. Poor country. One thing you may gloss over, or one thing you may be able to discern from the art, is that it's very inspired kind of almost by strip comics. Just the way the characters look and the way the paneling's done. These are things you would kind of see in strip comics, but obviously the Los Bros Hernandez are doing a better job of it, adding a bit more detail while following kind of like those same design patterns, like the patterns on his shirt. No matter what, like even if his hands are down, it's just the lines are always going to follow in that same dictated direction. On the design of the shirt, it doesn't vary. And that's something very close to what old strip comics would do. Just the way the buildings are, even too. Everything's inked, everything's done. But it's very much their own. And you see this guy getting into action while the monster's starting to terrorize. And then you would cut from right here to Mechanics starring Maggie, Race, Hopefee by Izzy Rubens. Maggie and Hopey are these girls that were basically brought up and designed by Jaime. And initially, Maggie has blonde hair and Hopey has black hair, but through the course of changing this, Maggie does eventually have black hair. This is just kind of almost the start of it. Before they knew what they had, what they were going to do with it, this is the start of the characters. And I even like the lettering. Although somebody might say like, oh, this is very amateurish or whatever the fuck. I don't care. I love the lettering in this. It looks cool. And right off the bat, just the way they look, especially as you follow this. Oh my God, as you follow Maggie through her day, working as a mechanic on some space age tech and everything. This is a good example of it. Jaime can draw women in any position, in any way, and they just always look sexy. I would argue that he draws the best women in all of comic books. I just love the design. I just love the way he draws women, because he can draw them, with thick thighs, with big booties, whatever, thick necks. This would be more prominently shown in his Women of Wrestling book. I own it. I didn't pull it for this, but it's in here somewhere. This is Race, another mechanic that Maggie has a crush on. Kind of, it's almost like a Telemundo, like a Spanish drama almost, in the way that like these things sort of play out, but it's also a little bit science fiction too. It's really the flavor of Jaime's writing, and even Gilbert's too. It's so specifically like their own. It's like a specific flavor of writing that just entices you to read more. But you can't put a finger on specifically what it is either. All right, people keep calling me like crazy today for some reason. Again, going back to like the cartoonish nature of this, which is just great. When this guy holds up his gun trying to stick him up, Race just kind of like punches him in through the air. It's hilarious. Beautiful shadows here on all the robots, and even Maggie again, that female form. Oh man. um, meeting up with her friends. These characters would all later play a prominent role in some form or another, but they would be renamed or retooled or reworked. Because Love and Rockets is it kind of starts out as the science fiction thing, but then it kind of boils down to more love than rockets. Which it still works. It's fine. This is a cool design. Like, didn't even have to do this, but it's just so cool that they did it anyway. Gilbert, the ceiling design here. Back to Bem. Almost manga in a way that this scene plays out with our guy here kind of facing off against this shadowy figure, this very fast but fat figure. This would actually be the figure on their self-published work that would come out. It's so cool, though. I dig it. Just leaping through. Dripping. That's cool. That would be hard to do. There it is. Kind of more the iconic design. And, while I'd like to explain this story to you of Bem and what the hell is going on, it's actually not super clear. At least in my case, I couldn't discern what the fuck was happening. But Gilbert would get better at his storytelling. I'm not even saying this is bad. It's just peculiar. But it looks cool as hell. Very Scooby-Doo-ish. It was him. It was Mr. Withers all along. The bad guy. Goodbye, Snoopa. Hey, Charlie, don't you? Can't. No. Psh. Well, I guess that's that. Hoppers by Jaime. Beautiful action scene. Almost Superman-ish. The bullets flying off of her. Just so cool. Daydreaming. Penny Century, you're fired. Penny Century is this girl who married this rich fella here. And she continuously cheats on him throughout Love and Rockets. And she gets pregnant by other men. And it's very unclear if he knows or not, or even if he gives a shit. But it's an interesting dynamic in terms of now she's filthy rich with him, and she hangs out with Hopi and Maggie, and they kind of have this relationship and rapport. And when they kind of need to get away from Hoppers and all the drama going on, they go and visit Penny Century, their friend. And this is saying how, like, the world's full of superheroes, so on and so forth. It's her daydreaming about being one of them. This is going back to Bem 3. So we return with Luba. This is still Luba, obviously. And, they're kind of feeling like it's the end of the world type situation. Monsters taking over, monsters coming back, and then the monster was upon the island. It's super cool. And the drama here that plays out is very obnoxious and fun. Super on point expressionism. Those glasses, I would argue, are part of the 80s when this is going on. So many people have gotten this wrong. What this is, obviously, with all the lines on it and everything, is, people would say it's very McFarlane, and I think this was before McFarlane, but this character is actually a derivative of, I think the movie's called, it's a black and white monster movie. It's called The Monster Who Challenged the World or something. And that's what you're seeing them dealing with here. That's what this monster is. And of course, the monster was in love with a girl, much like King Kong style. And yeah, so it's derivative of that. And even if you go to the beginning with the seashells, that points to it. Because in the monster, and I'll show a picture here of it, you can see the seashells on its back. And the girl that's like, in love with it. And again, that's calling back to their love of old horror science fiction, when they said they would love The Thing and so on and so forth, the original. Fuck you, Bem. Fuck you. Anyone else? I have little interest in the presence of wimpier mortals. I'm staying. I want to know. There's nothing to know. There is no more monster. Fuck you. I bid you farewell. Flick. Still alive. How to Kill A by Isabel Rubens. This is kind of in between story to the first Love and Rockets. It's better read than told. Almost impossible to tell you what it's about. And there you go, it's over. Frankenstein, monsters, cave of monsters, going through like an Alice in Wonderland deal. Back in the house where it started. Yeah, as I said. This is kind of going back to Gilbert's story here, where the apocalyptic world is now in full effect, and there's a little drama between these two girls kind of figuring out what they're going to do in the world here. It's very space agey, very it seems to be influenced by science fiction of that time, when you didn't have a big budget and like man versus ant and stuff. It was always shot out in a desert scape, and even Star Wars, I would argue. Like this feels like a bantha. I think that's what they were called in Hoth. But it's hilarious, and look at how much work is put into it. There's like fucking like 18 panels here. Definitely space agey, science fiction. almost glimpses of Heavy Metal magazine in a way, because just like the weirdo getting the girl, and then they're like, no, hey, helping each other escape. It's it's just so many shades of things, that it's hilarious. Bam. So many characters. And here's the thing about this, and I'm gonna point this out in both Jaime and Gilbert's art, is that people would say this is maybe certain things, certain American artists influence. I don't think so, man. I mean, it is, but also this reads manga to me. This whole thing. Especially with like the textures of certain things, like the smoke going over him, almost like imprinting over it, so it causes that effect that you'd see in manga. The action hero in the middle of a big splash storytelling page, that's manga. Even if you go back to where is it? This thing right here. That's manga. That is 100% what I'm getting from this. I feel it, And this face, like somebody would think that, this is an American artist influence. This still looks like manga to me. The Old Man Withers. Doesn't it read Japanese? Something? That's what I've taken from it. Of course, I could be wrong. But no, I don't see... I see some American influence, but overall, it is their art. There's the, like, eccentric part of it where certain characters will be, like, over the top. But then at the same time, there will be seriously cool... panel layouts and things taken seriously and really good detail. I'm trying to find a good example of what I mean. Here we go. So this guy yelling, and his hands, the way they're overextended, feels like very cartoonish, because I know one thing Jaime has mentioned in interviews is being influenced by Dennis the Menace comics. And that's how characters, would overreact in situations. But then you could draw something serious like this with a beautiful female form. Both Gilbert and Jaime, their art almost kind of complementing each other more in this issue than they would in the future, where you'd get that flavor of Gilbert's polymer and then Jaime's, Loca's, his story, taking place in his world. It's kind of neat because they're brothers, so you see the comparisons, but you like if them influenced by each other in a way to continue to draw, but at the same time, over time, you'll see the differences in their art. 6-pack. That's Black Flag. Also, the brothers Hernandez into punk. They were punk rockers as well. So the attitude of doing their own comic book by themselves, kind of the punk attitude, like, no, we don't want to work for Marvel and DC. We want to do our own thing. That's what this is. That's really what Love and Rockets is. It's got that punk rock attitude. And in the Locust stories, you'll see that with Maggie and Hopi, is that they do eventually become part of the punk scene. And Hopi especially is in a band and ape sex. Like there's all these internal bands of Hoppers, which is the city and place that the Jaime characters take place in, and then Polymer is where the Gilbert and Luba and stuff take place in, as I've said. But just to make it clear, they are two separate worlds that feel connected by, one comic book. See, look at that. Rip. She rips her pants. I just love it. Something you see shades of in Return of the Living Dead when all the punkers are walking down the street and they have all the graffiti on the wall. It's so good. And their women are so beautiful. Oh man, what an iconic panel. Look at that shit. Imagine trying to figure the figure work out for this. And the perspective grid for like the stage and the back here and then over here there's a door. And the words on top of it. I've always said that Jaime might be one of the only people in all of comics to make me truly believe these people are holding the instruments and that they're actually, like, that's how you would stand if you were holding a bass playing it. There's just something so brilliant about it. But there is Spanish influence, not only in character design, but in the stories. Like the death of Speedy is a big story in a character, and it's so much to talk about. It's hard for me to sit here and go on and talk about just issue 1, but also not mention like the overall 30+ years or whatever of Love and Rockets that's been going on, and just how influential it's been on my comic work, comics in general, how overlooked it is, how pissed off and annoyed I am at the fact that it's so fucking overlooked, which is why I'm doing this video, partly. Just kind of cool. Using blacks to tell a story, laser beam eyes. They would do this in the beginning a lot too. Both Jaime and Gilbert, they'd use blacks and people talking in the dark. It's very of that time. Again, going back to those strips where like you'd see the character's eyes open in the darkness, and then they'd be like, wait, who's that other person? And you'd see another like sinister eye. It's kind of that same taste and humor. More Bem. This would definitely be these lines on the floor here in the buildings would definitely be more of Gilbert's work in Polymer later on. Good perspective. Bam. Written, drawn, and lettered by Gilbert Hernandez, 79, 80, 81, over the course of 3 years. And there's the cover for the actual first Love and Rockets, their self-published printed version before this published version. Look at those female forms, man. God, I wish I could draw that good. And this is Jaime at 19 or something. Oh, man. Yeah, that's Love and Rockets. I it's so hard for me to want to do this book justice or being able to, because there's so much to talk about. There's this huge legacy with Love and Rockets that's just continuing to go on, and with Gilbert and Jaime both, it's like, how many times can these guys do home runs? And every time I pick up a Love and Rockets book, they're hitting fucking home runs. Like all the stories that come after this, where you go through, these characters age, and over time, Maggie and Hopi, they get old, and they evolve, and they try to think about their punk days, and you see them like slowing down, and it makes you feel sad, but it feels like them personally, and the drama that's going through with them, and even with Luba and her stories, and going through Polymer, and how that changes her life, and how many kids she has, and how many men she meets, and even Penny Century having different kids, and just so on and so forth, through the time that they put into this book. These characters do change and evolve, and you learn things about like how their family members died, and what was going on behind the scenes, and how dark it was, and Jaime and Gilbert's will sometimes not directly tell you what's going on. The comic books ask you to pay attention to them, because you have to read between the lines sometimes, and you're like, oh my God, this is what's going on. And then you clicks, and then you're like, wow, this is great, because they're not spoon feeding you, the story. They're telling you just enough to where you're like, you put the pieces together, it clicks, and you're like, wow, oh my God, okay, I know what's going on now, and it's messed up, or it's humorous, or it's dramatic, and it's unlike storytelling you'd find in, bullshit superhero comics that come out every month. And nothing against superhero comics, especially when they are on fire and doing good storytelling, but there's just something more here, human, about these characters in Love and Rockets that's going on, that I can't even explain it to you. You just need to give it a chance. You need to read it. You need to pick up these books, and give them a look for yourself. But I would suggest starting with, I think it's called The Girl from Hoppers or something. There's 2 graphic novels that start out the Jaime side of it. And I think Maggie the Mechanic isn't the one you want to start out with, in my opinion. Not saying you shouldn't give it a chance. You might feel different. And then for Gilbert's side of Polymer, just the first graphic novel, I forget what it's called, something Soup, Heartbreak Soup or something. You start from the beginning on Gilbert's side, but on Jaime's side, like even when you get into issue 2 of Love and Rockets, which I do have, and I will go over all of them at some point, you're, I don't know how to explain it. There's not direct storytelling going on at the beginning. It's kind of like a lot of weird explaining. Well, we'll go over it sometime, but either way, give these books a chance. Don't forget that in the future we will go over the Comics Journal 100, which has a very sentimental opening from Gary Groth, and he talks about how he directly feels about comic books in it. It's great. Then there's the dedication to Love and Rockets, and then there's the quotes from Jack Kirby about his fight with Marvel to get his art returned to him, how much Neil Adams tried to put in help to do that as well. It's full of good stuff. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the things. We're going to come back for more Love and Rockets. We're going to go through Comics Journal 100. Don't forget they have influenced me as well in creating my own book. Super